you might think progress feels difficult because you lack motivation, discipline, or willpower. But what if none of those are the real reason? What if the resistance you feel is not a flaw, not a weakness, and not something broken inside you, but instead a normal response produced by your brain doing exactly what it evolved to do? Most people assume struggle means failure. They interpret hesitation as proof they are not capable. Yet hesitation is often not failure at all. It is protection. The human brain is not designed to prioritize progress. It is designed to prioritize safety. And safety does not care about improvement, ambition, or growth. Safety only cares about survival. Understanding this single principle changes how you interpret every moment of resistance you experience. Because once you see resistance as protection rather than sabotage, the entire experience of being stuck begins to look very different. People often describe progress as something they want but cannot seem to maintain. They start routines, plans, or changes with clear intention, yet something invisible interrupts them. That interruption is rarely dramatic. It does not feel like panic or fear. It usually feels quiet, subtle, almost reasonable. Thoughts appear that sound logical, maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe when conditions are better. These thoughts feel sensible, not obstructive. That is why they are so persuasive. The brain is extremely skilled at presenting avoidance in a way that sounds intelligent. It does not announce that it is stopping you. Instead, it convinces you that pausing is the wise decision. This is why many people believe they lack discipline, when in reality they are experiencing something far more ordinary, a protective system working exactly as designed. The difficulty is not that progress is impossible. The difficulty is that protection is persuasive. People often describe progress as something they want but cannot seem to maintain. They start routines, plans, or changes with clear intention, yet something invisible interrupts them. That interruption is rarely dramatic. It does not feel like panic or fear. It usually feels quiet, subtle, almost reasonable. Thoughts appear that sound logical, maybe later, maybe tomorrow, maybe when conditions are better. These thoughts feel sensible, not obstructive. That is why they are so persuasive. The brain is extremely skilled at presenting avoidance in a way that sounds intelligent. It does not announce that it is stopping you. Instead, it convinces you that pausing is the wise decision. This is why many people believe they lack discipline, when in reality they are experiencing something far more ordinary, a protective system working exactly as designed. The difficulty is not that progress is impossible. The difficulty is that protection is persuasive. Resistance often feels like a personal limitation because it happens internally. There is no external barrier, no visible obstacle, nothing you can point to and say, "This is what stopped me." Instead, the barrier feels like it came from you. That is why people assume they are the problem. But resistance is not identity, it is sensation. It is the brain producing signals intended to slow you down until it feels certain that what you are doing will not harm you. The problem is that certainty rarely arrives before action. Certainty usually follows action, yet the brain prefers certainty before action. This creates a natural conflict. You feel pulled toward progress and held back at the same time. That tension is not dysfunction. It is the normal interaction between curiosity and protection. Both systems are trying to help you. They just have different priorities. Resistance often feels like a personal limitation because it happens internally. There is no external barrier, no visible obstacle, nothing you can point to and say, "This is what stopped me." Instead, the barrier feels like it came from you. That is why people assume they are the problem. But resistance is not identity, it is sensation. It is the brain producing signals intended to slow you down until it feels certain that what you are doing will not harm you. The problem is that certainty rarely arrives before action. Certainty usually follows action, yet the brain prefers certainty before action. This creates a natural conflict. You feel pulled toward progress and held back at the same time. That tension is not dysfunction. It is the normal interaction between curiosity and protection. Both systems are trying to help you. They just have different priorities. Most people misinterpret hesitation as lack of ability. They assume that if something feels difficult to begin, it must mean they are not suited for it. But difficulty beginning is often unrelated to capability. It is related to unfamiliarity. The brain does not resist because you cannot do something. It resists because it has not yet learned that doing it is safe. Capability and safety are separate evaluations. You can be fully capable of something and still feel strong resistance toward it. This is why highly competent people often delay important actions. It is not because they lack skill. It is because their brain has not yet categorized that action as predictable. Once predictability increases, resistance usually decreases, but predictability only increases through exposure. Which means the very thing resistance tries to prevent is the thing that would eventually reduce resistance. Another reason progress feels difficult is that the brain is designed to conserve energy. Throughout most of human history, energy was limited. Survival depended on not wasting effort. Because of this, the brain developed a preference for efficiency. It favors familiar actions because familiar actions require less energy to perform. New actions require more processing, more attention, and more evaluation. That extra effort signals cost. And the brain is always measuring cost. When the perceived cost of an action appears high, hesitation increases. This is not laziness, it is conservation. The brain is trying to use resources wisely. Unfortunately, it cannot easily distinguish between necessary effort and unnecessary effort. It only detects that effort exists. So when progress demands energy, the brain sometimes interprets that demand as something to avoid. Emotions often act as messengers for protective systems. When something feels intimidating, heavy, or overwhelming, the feeling itself is a signal, not a command, but a signal. The brain is communicating that it detects uncertainty. Many people assume these feelings mean they should stop. But feelings are not instructions, they are information. The sensation of resistance is the brain reporting its assessment of risk. That report is influenced by past experience, memory, and prediction. It does not always reflect reality, it reflects expectation, and expectations can be outdated. The brain updates its expectations slowly through repeated evidence. Until it gathers enough evidence to change its prediction, it will continue producing the same signals. This is why progress often feels hardest at the beginning, when evidence is lowest and uncertainty is highest. Comfort is often mistaken for peace, but comfort is really familiarity. Familiar situations feel easier not because they are better, but because they are known. Growth, on the other hand, requires stepping into situations that are not yet known. This creates a natural tension between comfort and expansion. The brain tends to choose comfort because comfort requires no recalculation. Growth requires constant recalculation. Every unfamiliar step demands evaluation, prediction, and adjustment. That process uses mental resources. So the brain leans toward what it already understands. This does not mean growth is wrong. It means growth is costly, and the brain is always balancing cost against perceived benefit. If the benefit is unclear, the brain may choose the lower-cost option, staying where you are. Uncertainty is the single strongest trigger of hesitation. When the brain cannot predict an outcome, it increases caution automatically. This process happens below awareness, which is why resistance often feels mysterious. You may not consciously think something is dangerous, yet your system reacts as if it might be. This is because the brain does not wait for certainty before preparing for risk. It prepares first and evaluates later. In evolutionary terms, this strategy was efficient. It was safer to assume something unfamiliar might be risky than to assume it was harmless. That same ancient logic still operates now, even in situations that pose no real threat. The brain is not trying to hold you back. It is trying to prevent harm. The difficulty is that its definition of harm is extremely broad. Anything unfamiliar can qualify. So when progress introduces unfamiliarity, Your brain treats it cautiously until it gathers enough experience to update its prediction. Beginning something new often feels heavier than continuing something familiar. This is because starting requires the largest prediction adjustment. At the beginning, the brain has almost no data about what will happen next. With little data, uncertainty is high. With high uncertainty, caution increases. Once you begin, however, information starts accumulating. Each small piece of experience reduces uncertainty slightly. As uncertainty decreases, the brain relaxes its protective signals. This is why many people notice that things feel easier once they are already in motion. The difficulty was never the action itself. The difficulty was the unknown that existed before the action. Starting is hard not because you are incapable, but because starting is when prediction is weakest, and the brain prefers strong predictions. Until it has them, it hesitates. The brain has a built-in safety bias. It weighs potential threats more heavily than potential rewards. This bias helped humans survive unpredictable environments. Missing an opportunity rarely caused immediate danger, but ignoring a threat could. So the brain evolved to treat possible risk as more important than possible gain. That bias still operates today. When you consider a change, your brain instinctively scans for what could go wrong before it considers what could go right. This happens automatically. It is not pessimism. It is prioritization. The system is designed to protect first and explore second. The result is that progress often feels intimidating even when it is beneficial. The brain is highlighting possible problems because highlighting problems used to increase survival. Understanding this bias helps explain why positive change can still feel uncomfortable. When you want progress but feel resistance at the same time, it can seem as though you are working against yourself. One part of you appears ready to move forward while another part quietly pulls back. This does not mean something inside you is broken. It means different systems in the mind are doing different jobs. One system is responsible for curiosity, exploration, and change. Another system is responsible for protection, stability, and caution. These systems are not enemies. They are partners designed to balance each other. The tension you feel is simply the result of their interaction. The exploring system gathers new information, while the protecting system evaluates whether that information is safe. Until protection is satisfied, it slows movement slightly. That slowing sensation is what most people call resistance. But resistance is not sabotage. It is the brain pausing while it checks whether forward movement is safe enough to allow. Many people try to overcome resistance by applying pressure to themselves. They believe that if they push hard enough, they can overpower hesitation. Sometimes this works briefly, but it rarely lasts. The reason is that force sends a signal of urgency to the brain. Urgency is often associated with danger. When the brain senses urgency, it becomes more alert, not less. Increased alertness makes the system scan for risk more carefully. The more carefully it scans, the more potential problems it detects. That detection strengthens protective signals rather than reducing them. So instead of dissolving resistance, force can intensify it. The brain is not persuaded by pressure. It is persuaded by proof. Proof comes from repeated safe experiences. When the system observes that something unfamiliar consistently causes no harm, it updates its prediction. That update reduces caution naturally. Calm evidence changes the brain's assessment far more effectively than intensity ever can. The brain learns primarily through evidence gathered over time. Each experience you have provides information that the system stores and compares against future situations. When something new happens and the outcome is neutral or safe, the brain records that result. One experience alone is rarely enough to change prediction. The brain prefers patterns, not single events. When similar safe outcomes repeat, the pattern becomes clearer. As the pattern strengthens, uncertainty weakens. As uncertainty weakens, resistance softens. This is why repetition often changes how something feels. At first, an unfamiliar action may seem heavy or uncomfortable. After enough exposure, the same action can feel ordinary. The situation itself did not transform. The brain's prediction did. The protective system is designed to update cautiously, not instantly. Its goal is reliability, not speed. Once it becomes convinced that something is consistently safe, it no longer needs to slow you down. The sensation of difficulty does not always reflect the true difficulty of a situation. Often, it reflects how the brain interprets that situation. Interpretation is shaped by memory, past experience, and expectation. Two people can face the same circumstance and feel completely different levels of resistance. The difference is not in the event itself, but in the prediction each brain generates about what might happen next. Resistance is influenced more by anticipation than by reality. The brain is constantly estimating outcomes before they occur. If its estimate includes uncertainty, it produces caution. If its estimate includes familiarity, it produces ease. This means the feeling of difficulty is not always a reliable indicator of how hard something actually is. It is often a signal that the brain is still evaluating. When familiarity increases, the evaluation becomes quicker, and the sensation changes. The environment may stay the same, yet your experience of it can feel entirely different. Time is an essential ingredient in how resistance changes. The brain rarely shifts from caution to comfort instantly. It moves gradually, collecting evidence step by step. Each repetition adds information. Each new piece of information refines prediction. As prediction improves, uncertainty becomes smaller. As uncertainty becomes smaller, protective signals become quieter. This gradual adjustment is why persistence often feels easier than beginning. Beginning has no history. Persistence has data. With data, the brain can predict more accurately. Accurate prediction produces a sense of stability. Stability produces a sense of ease. Ease is not something you force. It is something the nervous system allows once it trusts its prediction. When something has happened enough times without harm, the brain stops treating it as unfamiliar. Recognition replaces caution. That is when resistance fades naturally, without effort or pressure. Progress can feel slow because the brain is designed to update its expectations carefully. Rapid changes in prediction would be risky for a system whose primary job is survival. So instead of shifting quickly, the brain waits for consistent confirmation. It prefers to see the same safe outcome multiple times before accepting it as reliable. This cautious approach protects you from forming false assumptions based on limited information. However, it also means change often feels gradual. Your conscious mind may want immediate results, but the brain prioritizes certainty over speed. Certainty requires repetition. Repetition requires time. During that time, you may feel as though nothing is happening. Yet internally, the system is learning. It is adjusting its predictions based on what it repeatedly observes. What feels slow externally is often steady progress internally. Before allowing exploration, the brain looks for stability. Stability signals that the environment is predictable enough to move safely within. When stability is low, protection dominates. When stability rises, curiosity becomes stronger. This order is deliberate. Exploration without stability could expose you to unnecessary risk. So the brain builds a foundation first. Many people interpret this phase as stagnation. In reality, it is preparation. The system is ensuring conditions feel safe enough to support movement. Once it determines that stability exists, it becomes more willing to allow expansion. Movement then feels easier, not because your ability changed suddenly, but because the brain's evaluation changed gradually. What once seemed uncertain now seems manageable, and when something feels manageable, resistance decreases. Resistance is often mistaken for a signal to stop. In truth, it is more like a signal to examine. The brain is not declaring that something is impossible. It is asking whether something is safe. Questions can feel like barriers when you expect immediate certainty, but questions are simply part of evaluation. The presence of resistance means the system is still gathering information. It has not yet reached a conclusion. That state can feel uncomfortable because uncertainty naturally creates tension. Yet uncertainty is also temporary. As information increases, tension decreases. Resistance does not exist to block you. It exists to slow you until the brain understands what is happening. Once understanding improves, the signal changes. Eventually, often without a clear moment marking the change, something shifts. What once felt heavy begins to feel neutral, not exciting, not dramatic, simply normal. This transition happens when the brain updates its prediction. The unfamiliar becomes familiar. The uncertain becomes recognized. Recognition removes the need for caution. When caution fades, resistance fades with it. This shift is usually subtle. It rarely arrives with strong emotion or celebration. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, yet it is significant because it shows that learning has occurred. The system has gathered enough evidence to change its expectation. Once something is categorized as predictable, it rarely feels as difficult again. The situation itself may be unchanged, but your internal response is different because the brain no longer treats it as unknown. When progress feels difficult, it does not automatically mean you are incapable. More often, it means your brain is still learning. Resistance is not proof of failure. It is proof of unfamiliarity. The mind protects before it adapts, and adaptation always requires time. When you understand this, difficulty stops feeling like a personal flaw. It begins to feel like information. Information about what your system has not yet confirmed is safe. Once confirmation arrives, the experience changes, not because you forced it, but because the brain updated its prediction. This is not a matter of willpower. It is a matter of understanding how the system works. And when you understand the system, resistance no longer feels like an enemy. It feels like a message.